right, everybody, we're back, and we have Ian Hickson,
Hello.
tech lead for the Flutter team, and we got a bunch of questions people have asked, so let's get right to it. So this one came in from Twitter, from M3 Sipti in Islamabad. So, you know, assalamu alaikum, Pakistan. He wrote, a column with unfixed height and 100 plus list tiles is a problem. Do you have any suggestions? So I'm guessing this is a performance situation. If you just put a bunch of list tiles in a column, and there's a lot of probably work that Flutter's doing at that point.
Yeah,
right?
you really want to only be building the widgets that are actually on the screen. That way, we don't waste any CPU cycles building things, laying them out, painting them if they're not on the screen. Okay. So the easiest way to do that, listview.builder. Okay. You literally just tell it how many items you have, and it'll just call you for each item, and you build that item, and then we won't even call you again unless it changes. Until the thing goes off the screen, and then comes back on the screen later, we'll call you again.
And so with that, it's not recycling anything the way that a lot of, like a recycler view on Android, and there's a similar control on iOS. It's not recycling any widgets there, it's rebuilding when necessary.
That's right, we don't actually need to keep any of the objects around because Dart's garbage collection basically makes that very efficient. We just allocate the objects we need on the frame when we need them, and then we use them, and then when they go off screen, we get rid of them.
Cool. All right, so hopefully that helped out. All right. Here's an interesting one. This one comes from Sudan. So salam alaikum again. This is from 3Mrab Dal Cream, I think. Hopefully I got a good pronunciation of that. Can we build games with Flutter, and how would the performance be?
Depends on the kind of game.
Yeah.
So you can't really build a 3D game with Flutter, like Quake or
Flutter doesn't expose 3D sort of things like that, right?
You can do 2D games. In fact, one of our earliest demos was a 2D game. You may have seen it in some of the screen, some of the videos during the keynote today.
Oh, the sliding tile game.
That's right.
Okay.
And also another one, a much earlier one that we had was the kind of the space shooter game. That was also.
I've also seen that in the keynote at some point.
That's right. Okay. We don't support that really as like a first-class citizen. We don't have a framework built for that, but there are frameworks in the community. The community has provided to do exactly that. Okay. I think Flutter Sprites, I think it's one of them.
I've seen that package. Yep.
And the performance is fine. I mean, we are designed to render pixels to the screen, and games do that just like UIs do that. There's not really a difference from the engine's perspective.
I've heard that the actual under the hood sort of architecture of a built for release Flutter app actually isn't that different than a typical mobile game. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to the way Flutter apps work is very similar in many ways to how a Unity game would work.
Okay.
We literally just drive all the pixels, and we update the parts of the 2D scene, which under the hood is a 3D scene in the GPU. We update that when it changes, and we leave the stuff that hasn't changed when it doesn't change.
Okay. Interesting. In sort of Unity, everything built on top of the renderer is going toward the use case of games and optimized for that, and Flutter is going mostly toward apps and those sorts of use cases. That's really interesting. All right. So what else we have? Here's a good one. This is from Tivrafoa in Brazil. And it's a question about when would you build a Flutter app versus a mobile-friendly website? So what is actually harder with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that would be easier in Flutter? Like, why would you prefer one to the other?
So, I mean, that really depends on who your target audience is.
Okay.
And honestly, if you're a big company writing a big app, you might want to do both. You might want to have your mobile web app for those people who haven't downloaded your app.
That's true.
Or who are on a device like a Chrome OS device or a laptop or something, whatever. And then you might also want your mobile app for people who want the more native experience. With Hummingbird, we are maybe going to make that easier. We'll see how that goes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where that project
I've got a couple of questions that came in.
Fire away, yeah.
So we have a couple of live questions. The first one is in the future, are we going to have support for Android or Apple Watch?
I have no idea.
Yeah? But we could, right?
We could. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. We're really targeting mobile right now. We're starting to look at desktop.
Watches are mobile.
But, well, it's true. One thing we have done, we have a demo, very early demo we did to prove that we are not fixed to Cartesian coordinates. We have a sector demo which renders UI literally using polar coordinates, which if you have a round clock face would be perfect.
An analog watch, that's all in polar coordinates, right?
No boxes, just sectors of a circle and truncated them as they go.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So what we're saying is, we don't know if we're probably not going to do something like that, but we would love it if somebody else tried to do something like that.
I certainly would love contributions to do that. We don't have anything on our roadmap right now for watching.
Right. But it's certainly something that there's a reason why it might actually be a good thing to do in Flutter, if you can do polar coordinates. So that sounds great.
All right, so you have one more, and I have one more, and then I think we're going to let you go. So,
all right.
Okay.
What's your other question?
My other question is, we all know that Flutter came from Chrome, and the question was, how has the original team used their previous knowledge from Chrome to build Flutter, and which features were inherited from Chrome to Flutter, if any?
Well, from the code perspective, we literally started from Blink. We forked Blink, and then basically started deleting code. And I think at this point, there's no code left.
Okay.
We literally have no code left. We still use the same graphics engine, Skia.
Right.
I think there's literally nothing else left. We don't use the same scripting engine. We don't use the same text layout anymore.
But it's fair to say that there was some experience you had with Chrome that sort of informed how you went about building
Absolutely.
this.
If you look at our internal style guide, like it's on our wiki somewhere, there's a document that talks about how you should design, our design philosophy, and so on. If you look at some of our earliest bullet points on there, it specifically talks about how to avoid some of the mistakes we had made on the web before. Using, mentioning document.write, for example, avoid document.write style APIs.
Right.
So yeah, we're very much learning from there. We've also hired plenty of people from people who've worked on the Android team and people who've worked on other platforms, and we're using everyone's knowledge. We're really trying to learn from all of our experiences.
Great.
Yeah, so we have one more, and then we're going to let you get back to enjoying the party. What feedback does the engineering team most value coming from the developer community? Because we come and ask, Eric, what can developers who want to get involved do to have a chance at some really good impact? Developers that are using Flutter, what are some of the things you need from them?
All feedback is great. We really love all feedback.
Done.
Even positive feedback. I don't mind if you file a bug that says you're great. But when you do file a bug, the most useful thing for us is make sure there's reproducible test cases. Make sure you have a piece of code that we can just download and run that shows the bug really clearly.
Okay.
That's really useful for us. If we just have a vague comment like, hey, sometimes my app crashes, I don't know what your app does, I don't know what device it crashes on, I don't know what's going on. But if you tell me, hey, when I run this specific function on a Samsung G5 or whatever, it crashes, then that's much more helpful. I can go get that phone, I can go run that app, and I can test it and reproduce the problem and try and fix it.
Okay.
You have to be able to reproduce it, in other words.
It is very helpful. I should say, if you can't reproduce it, it's still worth filing the bug.
Right.
Because if 10 people file 10 vague bugs that all say, hey, when I do this, it crashes, we might notice a pattern. For example, there's one bug that we're still dealing with. We haven't figured out exactly what's going on. We figured out it only happens with Windows 10 in China. I think it's when you're doing a hot reload, something like that.
Right.
And so, but we were only able to figure that out because we looked at a whole bunch of bugs that were filed at different times, and 90% of them mentioned Windows, and 90% of them mentioned, it's a problem with China, or mentioned that they were in China. And then we noticed we don't have any of this bug outside China. So, file the bug, that's the most important thing. And then once you file the bug, if you can, provide reproducible steps.
Right, that's great.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thanks for coming out.
Everybody out there enjoyed it. You can go head straight out that way and take the microphone with you. We're going to answer some more questions.
Goodbye, folks.
All right.
Thanks again.
Ian Hickson, everybody.
That was great.
All right. Let's do live stream.
Yeah, let's look at the live stream. We haven't done very much live stream recently, so let's.
We're getting live stream from Twitter. Let's go. Let's get back into the YouTube live stream and see.
Okay.
What do I have here?
Well, if you're looking for a second, I've got a question that I can answer really fast.
Go for it.
So we just had somebody who wrote it just a few minutes ago. They said, is there any chance of having Kotlin on Flutter? And I have a stock answer for that one, which is, if you're willing to give up hot reload, sure. but
Yeah.
so far nobody's taken me up on that.
Yeah, so stateful hot reload is one of the features that Flutter can get with Dart that's not easy to find in a lot of other languages. Hot loading code with Kotlin into a running JVM. Dart is built for that kind of thing with its just-in-time compiler and all of the other stuff that can still compile to native code at the end. And so there is still Kotlin code in a Flutter app if you want to. You can build platform channels code with Kotlin, for example. You're not tied to Java necessarily there. But the particular features that Flutter needs, it really gets from Dart.
Yeah. There's actually an article that I wrote, self-plug right here, called Why Flutter Uses Dart. And if you're curious about what are the advantages of Dart, you can read that. It's on the web. Just search for why Flutter uses Dart, and that'll help answer that question. Have you found anything?
Yeah, we got a couple here.
Okay, go for it.
We have one from Pedro who posted, is Flutter IO going to replace Android?
Is Flutter what?
Is Flutter going to replace Android? Will Android development be
So this is just like the question we answered earlier when people were asking us about React Native and stuff like that. No, Flutter is not going to replace Android.
They're two very different things. Android's an operating system, and Flutter is a software development kit.
Right, they're not even related.
Apps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're two different masters.
And even if you're wondering if straight ahead Android development is going to be replaced by Flutter, none of us think that's going to happen either. I mean, it's not like, something new comes along and it gets rid of something else. There are things that Android does really well and that it would be hard to do in a cross-platform type tool. So there's definitely use cases that will always be valuable for that. So, I mean, we can name examples of that, but I think they've gotten the idea. Let's go on to the next one.
Yeah, I just skipped past a question asking about background tasks and Flutter. And some things like that, which we can touch on a little bit. So certainly, again, a Flutter app built for Android is still an Android app, and a Flutter app built for iOS is still just a typical iOS app. And you can add code to do a number of things that way on the platform side. We use platform channels to talk back and forth. But speaking of background tasks, I was talking with Ben the other day. Have you seen Ben's background task article that he wrote about geofencing and scheduled tasks?
Right.
If you haven't seen it, it's great. He wrote a very detailed example and had source code up on GitHub for how to make a Flutter app that used geofencing to do certain things in response to GPS events. And so
that's definitely a need for background tasks. Yeah.
Exactly, and he had an app that was opening his garage door when he arrived home with his bicycle. And so the source for that is actually on GitHub. You can, if you do a search for it, geofencing and Flutter, you'll find it. And he did a great job in the article and put all the code up where people can see it. So that might well answer your question and show you how to get started with that.
Okay, I've got another question here.
Okay.
It's from somebody. They're asking what are the tools and what are the processes I could use to optimize my Flutter app? And they're talking about they were working on an app and it took up more space than they wanted, and the performance was not where they wanted.
I just saw Devin. This is perfect.
You saw, yeah, exactly. Okay. I saw Devin too. So we actually have the guy who's in charge of Flutter tooling. Devin, would you come on?
We're gonna spend a little time on my laptop here. Let me get back to back into this. Is just my Scratchpad app. Ladies and gentlemen, Devin Carew from the tooling team and our Portland office. Real quick, what are all the responsibilities that you have? What are some of the things that you cover in your work?
So we do cover a bunch of things on the tooling team. We make toolings for plugins for the major IDEs we support, with IntelliJ and Android Studio both, and Visual Studio Code as well. We work on static analysis tooling, so that is a command line tool and a language server. Command line tool is the Dart Analyzer. The language server is actually interesting. It's a separate process which powers support in IDEs through a protocol. So it's how we're able to provide support for multiple IDEs in an economic way. We support some other tools like DartDoc and DartPad, the language playground.
Of course, I use DartPad all the time.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that we think of as sort of making developers' lives easier, you are the one sort of overseeing production of those.
Yeah, yes, for much of it, yeah.
Okay. So I use IntelliJ IDEA. I use that. That's what I like to use. If I had, say, this, let me get an app going here. say it was misbehaving and I didn't know why, I was dropping frames or something like that, or chewing up gigabytes of RAM on my phone and heating it up so I could fry an egg on it. What are some of the tools that I can start looking into to get a handle on that problem?
Yeah, so that's an area that we've been working on more in the past quarter or two and going forward as well, performance tooling.
Okay.
We want to make it so that when Flutter was very small, users, if they had performance problems, they could come to the Flutter team and we could help solve their performance problems.
It doesn't quite scale that
As
way.
Flutter gets bigger, we want to make it so they can solve the problems themselves through either good documentation or good tooling. And if you go to the Flutter website, we already have some docs about ways you can make your apps more performant. Best practices, Flutter.io.
Is it just performance maybe I'll find it?
Yeah.
There we are.
And we're also in parallel building out new tooling as well to help you with that. And we're concentrating mostly on UI jank tooling. So my app is missing frames, like basically help people be better aware when they're missing frames, and then why, if they missed a frame, why are they doing that? And then the other side is we're looking at memory tooling as well to give people a better sense of their memory usage, and if they're using a lot, where's it going? Is it a leak or is it just a lot of resources? So some of that tooling is shipped now and available in IntelliJ and Android Studio, and some will be coming out in a few quarters.
Pipeline, and I think I have the latest version of the plugin right here in the latest version of IntelliJ I just updated. So
so if
there's
you
some
have
things on the sides here that I can see, and where am I going first, do you think?
Yeah, so
I have some jank.
For performance, you want to go to our Flutter Performance tab. It's on the bottom. It's active whenever an app is running. You'll have this available. There's some simple options we have which are useful that are just enabling features, performance features already in the Flutter framework. So if you toggle on the performance overlay, and then you interact with your app, you can sort of see your frame rate. We have the same information available inline in IntelliJ as well. And if you toggle that off, there's another one which is useful. It's the debug drawing toggle. It's, I think, the third one. It just sort of shows you the outline of your widgets and gives you a sense of, that's more for debugging layout.
So if I have something that's not where it needs to be, I can quickly come in here with this and just, it's like sort of putting border equals 1 on something.
It's a good way of just getting an overall sense of your layout. We also have a Flutter inspector for very detailed knowledge, but a performance feature we just launched, if you want to toggle off debug draw, and check this show widget rebuild information and give your code. So what we've done is we've instrumented your code at runtime to display inline in the editor which widgets are rebuilding. It's really like magical. If you've been doing Flutter for a while and haven't had this feature, so as you interact, we'll show you which widgets are rebuilding. If widgets are rebuilding much more than you, sometimes having them rebuild is perfectly natural, but sometimes you can end up rebuilding much more than you expect, and that could indicate a performance issue. Okay. Doesn't mean it is, but.
And so that was just that little, like on line 32, I think it was. I saw that text widget as it was building.
Yeah, but we have if you give that a bit more space at the bottom, you can see a table of widget rebuilds. This app is not doing a whole lot. If your app was more sophisticated, you'd see the widgets that were rebuilt, how many times they were rebuilt, and if you double click on that widget, it'll take you to where in the source it was created. So then you need to give your
it helps if you actually show the source window.
So
and there it is highlighted.
This is all just launched in last month's release and this month's release, and we actively used a lot of user studies to tweak this and user feedback. So this last release, I think the changes we made were just driven by user studies of trying to validate that the tooling we'd shipped was actually solving the performance problems users were having.
I mean, the rebuild indication of the widgets is great, not only for performance information, but also as people are probably learning Flutter.
Well, it gives you better insight into what your app is doing. Not performance related, but just like it's,
So one of the other questions, we got this, I think, a little bit earlier, was relating to Observatory. Which I know is at the moment a bit of an advanced tool, but can we take a look at that and maybe you show me some of the things that are going on with Observatory as well?
Well, I think one of the main features you should use Observatory for in a Flutter context is their timeline view.
Okay.
which gives you like a very detailed view of the events that your app is that your app is going through, and in particular can help you identify slow frames and why those frames are slow. This is some of the tooling we're actually rebuilding to make it more user-friendly. Right now is the only way really to debug UI jank in your app, but it's one of the ones that we do want to make basically more approachable to your typical user. So if you go into this view timeline and then check all these boxes,
Okay.
you're going to check those, go back to your application, interact with it a little bit, click a button or two, and then if you go back to the timeline view and choose refresh. So in a new version of this app, you wouldn't have to have toggled those options on or refresh. It would just be streaming data live.
Okay.
But you can now see in the timeline view, and we don't need to get into much more detail than this, I think, but you can see events for when frames were created, when your build method was running, what was happening in that build method. And basically our iteration of this, we hope to make it much more actionable for users. Like once they see this data, what does it mean they should do to their app to make it more performant? Or is there a performance problem at all, or would they just be optimizing where it's not really necessary?
And so I got here through a link in IntelliJ. This is a web server
It's a
that's just
web-based
running
app,
on my
yeah.
machine, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm afraid we've hit our time. We do need to say goodbye to you and answer some more questions here before we end our Q&A.
Got a couple coming in, so that's good.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming up.
Absolutely. No,
Thank you so much. That was really great. Awesome. Devin Carew, everybody.
So I got a couple of questions.
Okay.
First one should be a pretty easy one. The question is, well, I like the way they said it. They said it's time to end the debate. Which is better, VS Code or IntelliJ Android Studio?
Well, as I think we just saw, all of those are supported for Flutter development by Devin and his team. There's a bunch of engineers working on them. I think they're all going to end up coexisting. Everybody likes their favorite one.
I think during the keynote, most of the demos were on VS Code. A lot of people internal in Flutter use VS Code.
And there's a lot of people, Philip I think likes Android Studio normally. I use IntelliJ. There are engineers on the team that use a text editor, that use VI or Emacs or
yeah, you have to
Sublime.
mention Emacs or we'll be in
you got
trouble.
to use both.
But I think one of the differences is that I think some of the new features do appear on IntelliJ first, but they get to VS Code very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be just like every other question people ask us about this. It's like, which one's the best? The best is the one that you already know how to use, and just use it. I happen to use IntelliJ just because I have to end up testing a lot of the new features that come out. I actually work with Devin and the rest of the tooling team, so they throw a lot of things at me because I'm a good idiot for idiot testing. But it really depends on what's important to you. But it really is up to you what you use. There's not really a huge difference between them. So I've got one more that I have to ask.
All right, go for it.
We're running out of time. And the question is, and it's a great question because it answers itself. The question is, how do you pronounce fuchsia? So
a question about fuchsia I actually know how to answer.
Right.
You've already answered it.
That's one of the few questions about fuchsia that we can actually answer. So.
Yes, that's right.
And if you don't know what fuchsia is, it's open source. You can go look at it. But that's about all we should say about it.
That's about all I know about it. One of the reasons I like working on an open source project is that I'm not good at keeping secrets, so I just don't learn them in the first place. Everything with Flutter is in the open, so it's very easy to talk about.
Right.
Don't ever have to worry about it.
Do you have anything coming from the live stream?
Let me double check real quick.
Because we're kind of running out of time. I think.
I know we're gonna have to let everybody go in a minute. Let's see.
Anything interesting?
Question about accessibility that just came up. Of course, accessibility is a big concern.
Right.
When I joined the team, one of my first meetings on the team was an accessibility, not a review, but the person who does accessibility reviews came in and talked to us about the tools that we have and how to take advantage of the native ones in Android and iOS. There is an accessibility, the semantic tree in Flutter, if you ever see that referenced, that is in part for accessibility. It's a feature that's been designed into Flutter from very early on. else do we have here? Someone noted that they're installing Flutter right now.
Yeah.
Well done. Good on you.
You're obviously not here at the party then.
Somebody was wondering about Positioned, which is a widget which was a widget that I used earlier.
Yeah.
Positioned is a widget used with Stack, sort of like Expanded is used with a row. So with a Stack, you are, stacking up children one on top of each other, and you use Positioned. Maybe you want to have a small one on top of a big one, and you want it in the lower left-hand corner, or you want to make sure it completely stretches to fill the entire, height and width of the stack. That's what Positioned is for, and it's meant. Usually, it's a first-order child of a stack. So people calling out issue numbers, so they're looking at the. Somebody's asking about the impact of Flutter on the app size. That is something that matters a lot, certainly in certain parts of the world. Right now on Android, I know the number is just over 4 megs to get you just the engine and the basic widgets. That number was much higher when I joined the team. I think it was like 6 or 8 or something like that.
It was 6.7 for a while.
Yeah.
And they actually had not done any work trying to get that down. And finally somebody said, well, let me play with it a little bit. And it dropped down to 4.
You're like, it just decided now it's time to do the shrinking.
And they're not even willing to say that it would be that hard to do it even better. They got rid of that much just by eliminating things that were naturally being generated by the build process, but weren't being used. So they just figured that out and stopped those from being emitted. So there's almost certainly more things that they can do to get the space down. And I know that that's something they're still working on.
I think it's actually part of the CI process for the SDK. I think they build an app just to see if they've bloated it at all and look at that as one of the metrics every time they make a change. So It's definitely on the team's mind and something that's very important. I think we're going to be running out of time here quite soon. Maybe we have time for one more. Do you have one more from Twitter maybe we can cover?
Sure. Can you talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning integration on Flutter?
Sure. Well, you had a great demonstration, obviously, with what you saw in the keynote. Maurice is working on some great things. We're hoping to have a DevRel sample for ML in Flutter in the coming quarter, in part because we just really want to build it. I mean, who doesn't want to build something like that? And so that's there. For more advanced ML cases where you might want more direct access to like TF Lite or something like that, platform channels is a way that you can go as well. So, like I said, if we've been saying for a while now, with Flutter you have a great degree of freedom for things with platform channels. And so if you ever see a plugin that's not quite your use case, or you don't see a plugin for a tool that you want to use, you can always go use it yourself. You can always build that bridge yourself and get access to it that way. And when you do, please post it on GitHub, make a package out of it, so the next person can use it as well.
That's right.
All right.
And
I think we have
one more.
short one.
What about Code Push? Is there going to be Code Push, sort of like Microsoft Code Push?
Code Push. Sure.
You might want to define it, because not everybody knows what Code Push is.
Code Push is a very popular piece of technology that Microsoft, I believe, has made and open sourced, I think, to push live code to an app that has been released. I think with React Native, for example, because they're using a JS VM, you can push new JS code to the VM using this. And so this is something, the way Dart works in debug is you have a VM and you have just-in-time compilation, but when you build for release, you're compiling a native ARM binary, it's a static lib, and so you are not using a just-in-time compiler at that point. And so it's not something that's supported yet, but it is, I've heard this, like the hallway conversations about this. So it's the kind of thing, it's not, I don't know if it has a definite place on the roadmap, but it's definitely in people's heads, and I think we'll end up there soon.
I know that people are looking at it, so I just don't know if it's on the schedule yet. I have to say, I see that they're going to take a group photo of everybody who's here. So I think this is a great time for us to say goodbye and get in the group photo.
So obviously we weren't able to get we had a lot of great questions today. We weren't able to get to all of them. So if we didn't get to your question, we will try to get to them all after the fact and go in and answer on Twitter. If we saw one in YouTube, we'll try and get it on The Boring Show. If you've ever seen that, it's sort of our video podcast where we answer questions and hack on things. We also, I want to leave you with a bunch of resources that we have to grow as a Flutter developer. Some of them, there's a ton made by the community, and we on the Flutter team have some that we can offer you. We have the Flutter samples repo. We have the docs. We have the docs, the code labs, and the Flutter cookbook at flutter.io.
I think they took their
Clapping for us, sure.
Oh well.
You can come join us on Gitter on our Flutter/Flutter channel, on Twitter at flutter.io. We also have a big playlist of YouTube videos we made, like The Boring Show and Widget of the Week. And speaking of YouTube, I need to thank the small army of people behind the scenes tonight who have helped us put this together. Let me just name some. We have John and Adam as tech lead and tech support. We got Simon to the back on audio. Neil is the project manager. Derek, Daniel, Luke, and Rick are on graphics. The social team are Robert, Justin, and David. Crystal, Gabe, and Phil are producing. Ash is directing. He is Wim Layler. I am Andrew Brogdon. Good night from Flutter Live, and happy coding.
We have had a great time. Thank you all.